It's time for another G.I. Joe video, and so once more, the game is afoot. Let's dive into the history and origin of one of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero's most recent additions, a female member named Sherlock. This tale starts not with ARAH, A Real American Hero, nor with Larry Hama, nor with Hasbro or Marvel Comics. Instead, we're looking at a retired crayon eater that became the editor for IDW Publishing, a guy named Tom Waltz. Not Tim Waltz, the retired Army National Guard CSM. No, this is Tom, the same guy who worked on TMNT, including The Last Ronin, which, by the way, is one of my favorite Turtle stories. Waltz was born in Ypsilanti, Michigan, only about 37 miles up I-94 to Detroit, Michigan. That will become important here very shortly. Waltz then went on to join the United States Marine Corps, where he became a worldwide military command and control systems operator. That means he was working with wind subsystems like TSS, FTS, Telnet, and TLCF for teleconferencing, along with the Joint Operations Planning and Execution System to help with coordination and deployment for MEFs or Marine Expeditionary Forces. Basically, using RTAs or remote terminal areas and ADP, automated data processing, to help USMC, US Navy, and the NCA, which is the National Command Authority, along with their Joint Chiefs of Staff, communicate with a high level of ComSec, or communication security. He took that to the Persian Gulf in the early 90s as he took part in and became a veteran of Operation Desert Storm under General Boomer. He went to San Diego Mesa College and National University and became an MP in the California National Guard. And it was his time with CalGuard, the 49th MP Brigade, that he met the officer that would inspire our topic today. Waltz says that this officer was just as cool and just as tough as Sherlock. He kept that idea in his head for decades, unsure when to bring it to life. That is, until he found his way to editing the G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero series with Larry Hama at IDW Publishing. Tom says, quote, "She felt like such a natural fit for both the series and the writer, so I presented my pitch to Larry, and much to my happiness, he ran with it, and her, in fine fashion." He does qualify that a bit more when he says, "I only had a direct hand in placing Sherlock as a Detroiter, but that was definitely inspired by the fact that Hama made Stalker a Motown native all those years ago when he first created the character. I thought it would be cool if Sherlock and Stalker could find common ground as Michiganders someday in the series. Placing Mongoose as a Dearborn, Michigan native was also a Larry Hama call, most notably to pay homage to Mongoose's Muslim American roots. This would be a black female MP from Detroit who suffered an injury in a firefight, recruited into a top secret super soldier program, and got a new high-tech replacement arm. Her name, Staff Sgt. Regina Allen, codename Sherlock. I gave Larry all the pertinent biographical and physical information as I'd always imagined it, and the basic beats for her origin story is how Tom tells the story. But he was the one that really took her from core concept to a living, breathing member of G.I. Joe, springboarding from my origin and quickly building her into a bona fide and integral part of his long-running elite team of warriors." End quote. Well, there are some clear, direct parallels to the story of Marvel Comics' Misty Knight. He did say that while he acknowledges the similarities, did not consciously have her in mind. Perhaps that's where a bit of Larry was infused too. Neil Adams, Doug Munch, and Larry Hama co-created Colleen Wing, and Colleen was part of the Daughters of the Dragon and the Heroes for Hire, Misty Knight. Misty was created by Jenny Isabella and Arvell Jones, who himself is from Detroit, Michigan. So, who is Regina Allen? That's it, no middle initial. She was born in Detroit, Michigan, to a multi-generational law enforcement family. Her father was a detective with Detroit Metro, and her grandfather had been an officer in Chicago. Straight out of high school, Regina enlisted in the United States Army. She trained with the 14th Military Police Brigade at Fort Leonard Wood in the United States Military Police School, including STEM Village, earning her a 31 Bravo MOS, which is for military police. MP school used to be at Camp Gordon, redesignated Fort Gordon in 1956, which is now Fort Eisenhower. MP school then transferred to Fort McClellan in 1975 until the 90s, when it was closed by BRAC, or the Base Realignment and Closure Commission, and that's when it moved to Fort Leonard Wood. STEM Village is named after Brigadier General David Stem, who was the MP Corps Regiment Commandant from June of 85 to January of 87. It's got all kinds of structures in the village, like houses, a credit union, a church, a post office, a theater, some stores. There's an SRT site, a tactical clearing center, kind of like a shoot house for CQB, an engagement skill trainer for digital firearms training, and even some driving courses. The 14th includes the 701st MP Bat, and then the 787th and the 795th MP battalions, comprising 15 companies, all including MOS training, AIT, Advanced Individual Training, or One Station Unit Training, and crucially, the Military Police Basic Officer Leadership Course, over 19 weeks of training. More specifically, the MP Basic Officer Leadership Course is conducted by Bravo Company 701st MP Battalion. There she'd qualify with an M9 pistol up to crew serve weapons like an M240, M2, and even a Mark 19 AGL. That's a 40 Mike belt-fed automatic grenade launcher. She learned a lot of law enforcement tactics and operations through those weeks of training. Things in the police world that are different than the Army world, one of the most obvious would be keeping people alive, for example. She'd become an expert in active shooters, detainee operations, forensics, and conducting company field training exercises. FTX for MPs is a little different than going out into the field like for other courses, so instead it focused more around garrison, correctional structures, and barracks, and this place called Camp Charlie, which is a detention center modeled after a covert center called Camp Bucca, which is outside of Basra. Camp Bucca was the largest of its kind in U.S. history until it officially closed in 2009. So this training here gives the MP experience in stateside structures and those that we'd find overseas. That's really more for the 31 Echoes, though. The 701st owns and operates Camp Charlie, by the way. She'd also have gone through a 15-week CID SAC, or Criminal Investigations Division, Special Agent course, which happens to be in the Timmerberg Forensic Science Building on the other side of Spruce Ave from the Digital Training Facility, Thurman Hall, Maneuver Support Center of Excellence, and the Seaburn School, also at Fort Leonard Wood. Jack Reacher would have gone through a lot of this too, actually. CID Special Agents are considered federal agents, so if you see Sherlock with her federal agent cap on, it's okay. When she graduated, she received her 31 Delta MOS. Nowadays, CID is an accession program MOS, meaning if she'd submitted papers for CID now, she'd have to have her other 31 series MOS first. No more street to seat for CID. She was now tasked with conducting war crime, terrorism, cybercrime, and felony criminal investigations and operations. That means things like anti-drug ops, economic crimes, and both property and person crimes, referred to as general crimes. She would collect and analyze intel and provide PPD for HRPs or high-risk personnel like SecDef, CJCS, which is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and their immediate subordinates, along with combatant commanders, dignitaries, other DoD officials, including people who are retired. She and her CID partners were uniquely tasked with enhancing the U.S. Army's operational readiness, operating across all domains and throughout the entire spectrum of conflict. Her file card specifies neither her specialized section nor her field office or directorate, resident agency, or resident unit. So what I've described here is a good interdisciplinary mix of teams. I'll say though that she'd have been in a small mission-focused and cross-functional team when deployed, but sometimes it would just be her by herself in support of a joint multinational, humanitarian, or even a peacekeeping mission. Either way, Staff Sgt. Allen would be intimately familiar with federal law and UCMJ, along with planning and even supervising task force ops, developing informants, obtaining and executing on warrants and subpoenas, interviewing tactics, all manner of investigations, crime scene processing, and the collecting, protecting, and analyzing evidence for the JAG Corps, U.S. attorneys to prosecute or defend. Just no counter intel, that's ACIC's job. If she was working with Civi counterparts, they'd have gone through FLETC training in Georgia. Staff Sgt. Allen is also a polyglot, fluent in Spanish, Farsi, and Russian, and she took all of those skills to her deployments to the Middle East. And then her path finally intersected with the G.I. Joe team in A Real American Hero issue 281, standing proud on the cover and flanked by Hawk and Stalker for a story called Murder by Assassination. She was at a depot near the Trucial-Abysmia border conducting an investigation on convoy ambushes. CID didn't turn up any actionable intel, but Colonel Marks told Stalker that the hard-charging MP squad leader, Sgt. Allen, turned up more leads than the entire CID team. She'd uncovered a potential link to an international terrorist organization, Cobra. It's a terrorist named Al-Cabra, but the first hint is the phonetic sounding of his name being pretty similar to Cobra. Cobra. It'll turn out later that he's actually a CG, a Crimson Guardsman, which also explains how he got the helo. They planned a bait convoy and Sgt. Allen would be riding shotgun in a Hemet with a load of top-secret experimental ordnance to make it more enticing for their mystery ambushers. They had a counter IED Buffalo MRAP on point, followed by a Max Pro Dash M1235 MRAP, and 3 Hemets, a gun truck with a set of MG emplacements in the bed, followed by another Humvee, and then more Hemets and another MRAP on the tail end of the convoy. 2 hours into their journey, one of the Hemets was hit with an RPG, followed by another hit to an MRAP, which took out its rear and immobilized it. There were Al-Cabra's insurgents, and they crested an embankment with their AKs on full auto as a Cobra Aspen swooped in to steal that experimental cargo. Al-Cabra was in the Aspid with a Gyro Viper. The convoy was in a bad spot, immobilized with security elements separated and trapped, their points of egress blocked, and they were stuck in an open position with embankments and a bridge nearby, meaning they did not have the high ground, while providing little cover, or concealment for that matter, for them to safely move to. Sherlock climbed into the Hammock gun truck and fired off a stinger at the Aspen, downing it. Stalker and Mongoose, who were on rear guard in the convoy, took their truck right up the embankment with Stalker's thumbs firmly depressing the trigger while he grasped the spade grips as they headed right for the enemy line. Sherlock yelled for the radio to be cranked up. This was a SYNCARS VHF radio, or radio designed for CCI, which means it's a controlled ComSec item. SYNCARS is a single-channel ground and airborne radio system, so a JTAC, I think, got on the horn to radio in for CAS, close air support, in medevac, but we don't hear the full 9-line transmission on the page. Alcabra was up on the bridge and tossed a grenade at Hawk's feet, so Sherlock jumped off the truck, grabbed the grenade, and threw it back up at the terrorist, but that brave act cost her her whole arm, which was ripped to shreds in the blast. A Cobra Fang flew in, strafed the U.S. convoy, then touched down to evac Alcabra, but he gave the pilot a headshot and retreated while U.S. forces thought about their own tactical retrograde. That's when a Black Hawk from medevac and an HH-60 Pavehawk appeared. It would have been awesome if they also had the MH-60 Lima DAP, which is a direct-action penetrator, strafing the bridge with miniguns, chain guns, and Hellfire missiles, but maybe that was called off because they were kind of danger close. The HH-60 Whiskey Jolly Green 2 had been out for a year or so when this issue was published, but the Helo's nose looks different, so that's why I'm going with the Pavehawk here. Either way, that's supported by Hawk differentiating them. Sherlock, tough as balls, though she doesn't have any, refused morphine from the PJs. As they field dressed her wounds, she told her colonel that she knew part of the ambush was an inside job, so she had ahead of time leaked her position in the convoy and left a chemical marker next to her helmet so they could trace it. Someone had the marker on their index finger, and that someone was their rat. As the helos dusted off, her colonel said, "If they'd amputate, that's the end of her service." "Not if I can help it," Hawk said. He liked to find skilled, selfless soldiers, marines, and airmen to join the Joes, and Sherlock fit the bill. A few months later, we find Sherlock recovering in medical at the pit, which is now in Utah. Dr. Hauser was treating her when Sightline, who had a prosthetic limb of his own, brought her new robotic arm. Hawk came in to tell her the spray marker uncovered a whole conspiracy, but Alcabra was still large. Then the MPs came in, Law and Order, to get her PCS squared away. Their JAG specialist caseload also came in next to tell her she'd be helping him set up a G.I. Joe CID unit at the Pentagon. Stalker would join them, and they'd be investigating someone, likely Cobra or Alcabra, who was attempting to infiltrate and sabotage the very seat of the U.S. government. In issue 282, the G.I. Joe team had to appear before Senators Ling Torres, Raleigh, and Lardner as the G.I. Joe Oversight Committee about their recent unsanctioned armed incursion into Springfield. That was that Sean Collins rescue op. Sherlock was with the Joes in the hearing too, but she was undercover. Good thing, because a Fred series was trying to infiltrate the closed-door meeting. They should have met in a skiff for this, but, whatever. Senator Ling Torres had brainwave scanner programming waiting to be active like a Manchurian candidate, and Senator Lardner was on the take from Cobra. He had a camera and FM jammer in his lapel pin, so when the Joes tried to contact Stalker and Helix, they were jammed. The CG claimed to be Wade Collins, but the team knew better and radioed to Sherlock to stop him, but he got a carbon fiber bladed knife to her oblique muscle. She fought back, and we get to see her prosthetic arm in action. Apparently, this mysterious figure knew her. There's one CG in the hearing. It's likely this is meant to be Alcabra. He managed to break in and kill Senator Lardner, then ran away, cackling, so maybe he's Skeletor. Nah. They did capture the other CG, though. Sherlock was front and center on the cover of issue 283, surrounded by some of the other ladies on the team. She's not in the issue except reference, but it was her detective work that enabled them to track Alcabra, who is now attempting to sell a nuclear warhead. Funny enough, it was Xandar Zorana and Sarawak Sally on a Thunder machine that helped save the Joes and quickly become outmanned and outgunned. The B, or 1 in 10 retail incentive cover for issue 284 also features Sherlock. Dave Johnson did a convention exclusive for that issue, giving her the explosion treatment in the spirit of Hector Garrido for the first time. While we're at it, issue 285 also had a great RI cover, that one by Julie Anderson. So issue 284 brought Sherlock to Asia to meet up with the team and process the scene. They grabbed some evidence to send back to the lab for DNA testing just as Sherlock saw a barrel that EOD hadn't cleared. They made it out just as the barrel detonated. As commander on the scene, she had Chuckles get Alcabra's walkie-talkie on a fast mover back to the States while Black Hat hacked the security footage for a pizza place. They found evidence that Alcabra and his people had some pizza around their nuke. So they hacked the security footage for the pizza place, then jumped in a vamp with LJ and Molto to go to the pizza shop. In the street outside of the pizza shop, they made contact, and a kinetic engagement immediately ensued. Sherlock shot 2 tangos, saving LJ in the process. They traced the credit card transactions back to Springfield, and Black Hat uncovered that the hangar at the airport tied to Cobra. It was another trap. They made it out of the hangar just as it blew, but Sherlock was in there long enough to learn that Alcabra had at least 3 more warheads. Sherlock then jumped in the vamp and took Roadblock and Multa with her to the docks. They found the warheads and then the manifest, which put them onto one Mr. Ratsadon. But that guy had taken a bribe to trade seats with someone headed to Manila, the Philippines. But that was also a swap. Alcabra seemed to be 2 steps ahead of them this whole time. Sherlock then went out with Wetsuit, Rock and Roll, Muskrat, Falcon, Recoil, and Multo to the jungles of Southeast Asia. At the compound, they were attacked but defeated the Bats and stole their vehicles. Sherlock drove the Stinger next to the ferret ATV while Recoil and Multo blooped the guard towers. Inside, they ran into Alcabra, Overkill, and a bunch of Bats run by a Techno Viper. They all laid into the wave of Bats with their MGs, rifles, and shotguns. Alcabra tried to escape in an Aspid, so Sherlock fired a pair of X-04 missiles from the Stinger. Alcabra survived that crash, so Sherlock chased him down and the two ended up fighting, which finally revealed to her that he was a Fred Series CG. She crushed his fist with her new arm, then laid him out with a nasty punch of cold hard metal flesh bone. She stood over him, victorious, but still wanting to fully dismantle his operation. She took him down and took it apart. And so because of that, she truly lives up to her codename of Sherlock. In issue 287, Sherlock was off the coast of Cobra Island in the Gulf of Mexico, or Gulf of America, or whatever we're supposed to call it now. She deployed in a Zodiac off a shipwreck and cutter's Whale as part of the recon team. They had to sneak past Cobra patrols, including a hydrofoil and a Mamba. Outback had Sherlock and Multo check the North Docks. At the port, they found an entire container port operation. It was supporting the casino construction that Dr. Mindbender and another CG, Lower 343, were overseeing. The same one that would lead to Serpentor Khan's rise and the recent zombification of Cobra forces. This is where the Connex containers and those Bats of Overkills were going too. They successfully recovered some intel and 3 prisoners with active warrants that they'd exfilled with back to the Whale. Sherlock was also on the cover of issue 301. You can see her hanging out, firing her sidearm into the air, while Clutch launches the vamp off a cliff, full send. That's a pretty big shot for a little gun, too. She was then on the cover of issue 314, jumping out of one of Wild Bill's Tomahawks, along with Tunnel Rat and Tripwire. In the issue, they loaded into the Tomahawk from the flight deck of an aircraft carrier underway in the Arabian Sea, just south of Socotra Island, which itself is just south of Yemen, at the mouth of the Gulf of Aden. They were heading downrange to recover a 15-year-old girl named Laila Haddad, who happened to be a Benzini progressive activist and the daughter of Mustafa Haddad, the opposition leader to the hard-right majority leader, Colonel Fauzi. She'd been kidnapped by a Trucial-Abysmian terror group called the Black Kafaya. NSA said it was Alcabra who'd organized the abduction. Since her work in 287, the CG had escaped federal prison, now back at large. As they approached their LZ, she made sure her Beretta and her M4 were loaded and hot. Then they all put on their ponchos, but this was more to hide their gear. They linked up with Mongoose, who'd Halo dropped in the night before to recon the area ahead of time. And together they all went in hot, fragging insurgents and blowing heavy blast doors to infiltrate the Black Kafaya stronghold. They found the girl, except Sherlock knew immediately this was no girl. Female, but no girl. NSA informed them she was actually a 23-year-old Special Forces operator named Samara Bilal. Samara was an assassin who had plastic surgery to appear like Laila Haddad, wanting to get captured so she could tear the Black Cafe apart from the inside. Almost pinned down, they made a full frontal assault. Sherlock let Samara take Alcabra. To make it easy, they dropped them both on the Benzini side of the river. And so, the story of Sherlock continues on. Will she keep fighting with the G.I. Joe team? The answer is quite elementary, dear Watson. Yes. But for now, that's a wrap on this one, my friends. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.